Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OSCA Live, proudly brought to you by the Old Scots Collegians Association. My name's Scott Montgomery, OSCA's Executive Director, and it's great to have my good friend and former classmate from the class of 1985, Simon Illingworth. How's things, Simon?
G'day, Scotty.
Good to have you. Now, Simon has a strong connection to his old school and a former recipient of the school's prestigious Perelberg Award in 2004. He's an Australian former police officer who, for most of his career, was a member of the Homicide Squad, an anti-corruption unit. Simon investigated and prosecuted murderers and later helped weed out and prosecute corrupt police officers. He has many stories to tell, and sadly, Illo, we've only got about, half hour, 45 minutes to tell them. I could chat for a whole weekend, but I'm going to dig into as many as I can with you, and it's just great to have you aboard. So Simon, your connection, you're obviously from the class of 85. You played first cricket and you tried to play first football. And you weren't too bad at both. Can I just start with the story? I didn't play cricket, but I was with you and a couple of others when you got a couple of oranges and you ventured down to Gardeners Creek. And with your strong cricketer's arm, would you like to tell everyone else what happened from there?
Well, thanks, Scotty, I think. Yeah, we were having a little bit of extra time at lunch, and the scabby sort of started throwing things at us. So I launched with a couple of decent oranges and went through the bloody window over there, didn't it? Anyway.
Yes, it did. I recall. I couldn't throw half the distance that you could. And what happened from there? I do recall we had a visit.
Well, we had to go. Well, we went to the headmaster who sent us over there and over to apologise. And I think it was Father Godfrey actually that we went in, and he told me I had to pay for the window, and so that was it. I didn't cut him a cheque though, Scotty. I think that was on St Kevin's, that window.
Oh, good stuff. No, we're off and running, Simon. So well done. So Simon, you and I graduated in '85. And then you found yourself at Melbourne Uni, and you weren't there long. And it wasn't before long that you set your sails on a career in the police force, and you graduated in the police force with your lovely mum. And I'm just going to share a photo from your book, The Filthy Rat, with everyone. There's you and your mum joining the police force. So talk us about that journey from Melbourne Uni and deciding to become a police officer.
Well, I recall I was sitting outside uni when I should have been at a lecture, but anyway, that's another story. And the Russell Street bomb went off, not far away, and all the smoke billowed up over the buildings, and the sirens were wailing, and Constable Angela Taylor lost her life, and 22 other people were injured. So it was sort of a moment for me that stopped me in my tracks and made me realise that I'd sort of taken the freedom that this country provides us for granted, and ended up leaving uni and joined the police force.
And there you were in '84 and '88, I mean. And tell me, did they put you through a rigorous program? Because you were a fit young guy then, and did you get fitter, or how did that work?
We got fit. I was always concerned that I'd be a bit undisciplined, but it was. No, it was good. It was a good occupation for a young fella, and all the macho stuff sort of suited me. And it was a career that I thought was for me, and I enjoyed it. Went through the academy pretty easily and won the boxing and whatever while I was going through. So it was good. Excellent.
So Illo, you're a junior police officer, and you've had many life and death moments in the police force. What was some of the hardest calls you've had to make?
Well, I had a lot, Scotty, and it started from pretty much the word go, and I found I was good at it, and I arrested one of the top 10 most wanted criminals in my probationary period, and locked up bank robbers and drug traffickers, and saved a couple of kids out of a burning building. Arrested over a period of time, armed robbers. One was a particularly nasty incident where a bloke was levelling a sawn-off 303 at us, and I grabbed the crooks offsider, chased him down the road, and it was a big skinhead, and jumped on his back, and then grabbed a was a taser gun, and realised that it was a female. That's the sort of thing, I suppose, those sort of white hot moments in your life, you know, you either go for it or you walk away. And, you know, I was very fortunate, but probably the hardest thing in my career was having to show ethical courage when it counted when I encountered corruption, because I knew that there'd be long-standing, you know, detrimental circumstances for the rest of my career.
I'm just going to deviate off track because I've read your book, The Filthy Rat, and that sort of first experience that you've had where you think, Jesus, I don't think that's quite right. It doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
And that first experience in one of the first chapters of your book, do you want to just sort of explain that to me and some of the thoughts that you've described in your book, and that's probably going back a while now, but that's the sort of the moment for me that set you on this path that you've gone down. And would you mind just sharing that little story with us?
Well, yeah, I suppose to explain, Scotty, what you have in the police force is you have this really strong sense of loyalty. And loyalty can be both good and bad. You can have misplaced loyalty, of course. When I joined the police force, we used to have about 1,000 armed robberies a year. You know, people donning boiler suits and balaclavas and running into your local ANZ and often firing shots into the roof so that they got what was in the vault and not just the pissed off money from the teller, you know, the teller. So that sort of loyalty, and additionally, you know, if you're doing search warrants, and just purely because of my size and strength, I'd be the one who was always given the sledgehammer, and so you wouldn't have a gun. So you were completely reliant upon the others around you to protect you. So those sort of things and that sense of loyalty is very strong. And unfortunately, what happens is that you know, corruption can fester in that situation. So early on in my career, you know, I was confronted with a sergeant who was corrupt, who was stealing money, you know, organised the kidnapping, had you know, sawn off firearms, boiler suits, balaclavas, stolen number plates, etc. So, you know, it's pretty obvious that it's you know, you're going down a certain path, and you either, you know, well, there's a saying I remember a crooked policeman said when he was interviewed about taking bribes. He said, well, some people get on the corruption bus, some run alongside it, but very few have got the guts to stand in front of it. And so that was the choice that I had when I was 19. And, you know, it's set in stone the rest of my career pretty much.
I must admit, I had to read that couple of pages, and I reflected how old I was at the time and how youthful you were and the experience that you had to go through. And I was like, wow. So you and I played footy together. You played and I tried. And we were down at the Old Scotch Football Club, and there's lots of stories that we could talk about down there, but we won't have the time tonight. But behind me, I've got in my office here at the school a wonderful painting that my cousin painted for me. That you and I, we took the flag out in 1995, and there you are, just in the middle there, and I'm on that side. That's my left and right. So I just thought I'd share that with the audience because of the connection that you and I have. So it was a wonderful flag that we won. We beat the Zavs that day. Love beating them, as most Scotchies, all Scotchies do, in 1995. But the link to your story and how that relates is how important was the Old Scotch footy during that time? Because you and I were close, but some of the stuff and the crap that you were putting up with, you didn't divulge too much to a lot of us, and you kept a lot to yourself. But I suspect that the footy club was a good avenue for you to get away from the police force during those times.
Without a doubt, Scotty. I think that the Old Scotch Footy Club and the old Scotch crew, you know, our mates outside of football even, they kept me sane pretty much. You know, when you're in you know, an occupation like policing or something that is highly toxic, highly stressed, whatever, and even without my situation bubbling away in the background, you need to have mates around you that aren't involved. And whilst I didn't share everything with everyone, the fact is that they don't realise how much, you know, their input and friendship made my life bearable at that time.
Yeah, and that certainly comes through in your book. And I was really pleased that did my little part, and your mates played a part in keeping you upright and out of the wrong side of the dirt, pretty much.
Yeah.
Let's go on to your book, In the Dirty Rap. And I was fascinated by the detective work that you did and the detail. You have a mind for detail, and I think you thrived on it. And it was like a needle in the haystack, some of the stuff that you dealt with. And in 1998, 2 police officers were shot dead, point blank range. And that rocked Melbourne, and certainly would have rocked you and the force at the time. And there's a fascinating sort of couple of chapters, or a chapter indeed, with regards to how you tracked down those killers during that time, and just the detail and the burrow that you went down and the success that led to. So yeah, I'd be fascinated if you could share that story.
So most people, I guess, would remember Sergeant Silk and Senior Constable Miller being shot. They were sitting outside the Silky Emperor restaurant, which was a potential target for some unknown armed robbers, ultimately, that were doing, you know, some horrible armed robberies. And when I say horrible, like, it made even seasoned police officers prick their ears, you know, and they were shooting people, whatever. So my involvement in that was I'd actually was in the homicide squad. Hadn't been there a long time, but I did solve a job that involved a champagne gold coloured MX6, and there was about 250 of them. And went down, and eventually I found my killer and convicted him. But then this particular job happened. So when this happened, the crooks were pulled over by the 2 police officers. They ultimately got out, the crooks, and shot the police officers and then drove away. When they left, as it turns out, they shot their own back windscreen out of the offending vehicle. So we really had nothing to go on. You know, the most horrible crime, you know, that we've seen in decades. And there was a glistening on the ground as the sun came up, and it was a pile of glass cubes from the back windscreen. And we took those glass cubes out and went through them, and eventually we found one that was different to the others, and it had a back to front kind of H symbol on it, which we worked out was a Korean letter to tell a person in Korea on the production line where to put the demister on a Hyundai Excel hatchback. Yeah. And so we were able to work out which car it was. So, you know, we plugged the Hyundai Excel hatchback into the Vic Roads computer, and there was about 200 and something thousand of the bloody, that was Australia's favourite small bloody car. And, yeah, so there, look, to be fair, I'm not going to tell people how we've done it.
No.
But to be honest, we managed to get it down to 50,000, down to 20,000, down to 200, down to 1. And that was the Deb's car.
Yeah. It was a great result, and it was a great piece of investigative, detective work that you did and solved a major crime. And it was great reading for that. Simon, it's fair to say that you were ostracised for speaking out against corrupt police. That goes without saying. Your life was threatened. You had a family breakup with your wife at the time, and you had the courage to think that through, and you left the force, and you approached, I'm not sure how, but the Australian story was something that you were brave enough to go on, and you thought long and hard about doing that story, I imagine, and you certainly explained that in the book pretty well. And I remember watching that, and you've been on twice now with that. They've had a double up on that. But I remember that story coming on, and people are going, I didn't know Eli was going through all that, and how brave and courageous you were. And it was just a terrific story. And I still think it's one of the best Australian stories that they've got on the ABC. So, my question is, do you feel that speaking out has caused the culture of the Victorian Police Force to change for the better? Or do you still have some concern there?
Oh, look, it definitely changed for the better, and was that 30-minute program was the impetus for the independent corruption commission that we now have. IBAC. So yes, it did work. It added another layer to the oversight of policing. I mean, what you're talking about enormous powers that police have. You're also talking about enormous possibility of corruption. And so I think probably on a cultural level, so culture's the learned portion of human behaviour, right? So people took courage from that program, I think, and are willing now as police officers to, well, not willing, not wanting to, but they are much more happy to speak out. So that it put the genie back in the bottle, if you know what I'm saying. So largely, but you'll never stop corruption, Scotty.
No. You thought you could at the time, though.
Oh, look, no, yes and no. I mean, look, you've got to be able to control it, because if the good police officer fears the corrupt police officer and not the reverse, you've got a major problem, and so you have to do everything in your power to stop it.
Yeah. Moving on, the Herald Sun is loving its sales at the moment whenever it mentions Lawyer X. And Nicola Gobbo, the disgraced barrister used by the police force to stop a gangland war. The question I've had, and it's resonated with lots of our listeners tonight, was whether you knew her and what's your take on it all?
Well, yes, I did know her, and Nicola Gobbo. Look, it's difficult. There's some things that I can and can't talk about, my involvement as far as she goes, but I'll do my best. So some of the court cases, or some of the cases that I was working on, involved, gangland killers, also corrupt police, and the connection between all of that. It's widely known now that Nicola Gobbo was actually having a sexual relationship with one of those police that we had charged, and our court cases collapsed. So just to explain, and I know that it's difficult, but just to explain, so this is at a time when I have security doors, security fences, video surveillance, and I'm carrying a gun 24 hours a day, having to break my routine because I don't want to get shot dead. At the same time that the people who are giving me the gun and giving me money to supply those things into my house are actually dealing with the person, or one of the people, being Nicola Gobbo and others, that was undermining the law. And so realistically, and it wasn't just me, but we now know that we had no hope whatsoever. Yeah. Which is sad. I mean, it's sad, but I'm really quite buoyed now that all this has come out. And the funny thing is, and here we are talking, about Scotchies. Well, Chris Winnicky was the lead counsel in that Royal Commission and did a terrific job. And indeed, Chris's father, John, who passed away in the last 12 months or so, he actually represented me and prosecuted a case for me when I was threatened to be shot in the head for giving evidence in a corruption case. So, it's amazing where you run into Scotchies along the way, and I'm yet to be disappointed, which is nice. Yeah, and we're both good mates with Chris, and I'm hoping to have him as a guest one day. That'd be an interesting chat, as you and I both would know. Thanks for sharing that. Looking to educated current Scotch boys, how could we best prepare them to stand up against corruption? And there's lots of schools going down the leadership centre pathway. I'm not sure Scotch is doing that, but what's your take on that? Well, Scotch leadership's part of every part of your life. I can see there's a lot of schools going down the leadership centre thing, but to be quite honest with you, it's a bit naff. It's kind of Scotch has a century worth of leaders that they've produced. It's doing it the right way. It's not it doesn't shove values down people's throats. It gives you those values and it gives you the choice. There's one thing that Scotch College will never give anyone, indeed no school will, and that is courage. And that one of the things I think with Scotch is that it teases out the boys to actually have the courage to make the right calls. And I think that is something that Scotch College does very well. And I can't tell you, and I bet you no one can tell you how they're doing it. But at the end of the day, that you go through history and it's true. So Scotch College is doing a good job. Doesn't need a leadership centre as far as I can see, but I think ultimately decision making, ethics, and those sort of things are things that all schools, including Scotch, should be really starting to look at, and not just the staple subjects.
Yeah. I think that would resonate with a lot of the parents that are listening tonight. I'm going to fast forward to 2019, and you found yourself in another situation. It was Easter Sunday. There was a catastrophe. An international tourist was drowning. The surf rescue boat then flipped in a huge seas at the 12 Apostles. 3 surf rescuers were seriously injured. A helicopter rescued one, and you then climbed down a cliff to a cove. You entered the surf, and you're not a bad surfer, and got 2 surf lifesavers out of the water on your own. Sadly, both were dead. You're a CFA member at the time, and so why is a volunteer fireman pulling bodies out of the ocean? How did you find yourself there?
It was horrible. So I'm living down at Port Campbell. Everyone knows, well, you know, it's if it's not 10 foot, it's 15 foot surf here. It's like crazy wild. And that was Easter, which is the worst time, solid swells pumping in, and it was a horrible moment. And the reason why a fireman was pulling someone out of the water, and I can tell you, is because volunteering is dropping off the radar. You know, why would someone who's 52 be climbing down a cliff to a beach, getting washed out and pulling bodies out of the water? I mean, look, I'm fit enough and whatever, but what we're finding down here is that I think we're the canary in the coal mine as far as volunteering goes. And so just to explain, so we, you know, take COVID out of the equation. We have 3 million visitors, tourists here, all taking selfies on cliff tops and whatever, just, you know, risk taking as people do when they're on holiday. Guess what? Well, you end up with massive car accidents, you know, drownings and so on. Port Campbell itself has got 400 people in it, Scotty. Yeah. Right? And they're not, like, most of them are old. And so it comes down to a solid core of people. And realistic, there's probably only about 20 of us that turn out to these things. And so what we're finding is that young people aren't coming through the ranks. And so just to give you an idea, so before that rescue happened, so Fuzz Eunice, who was the surviving member, who was on the surf rescue boat, we were putting a fire out that morning. Wow. And so these guys they're in the SES, they're in the surf rescue because we have to. It's so I suppose, Scotty, the situation is that the younger people and all those Scotchies, I really urge you that, you know, we need you to actually step up into some of these emergency service roles, and whether that is as a profession or whether that's as a volunteer, we do need you. And you know, it's time. It's really it's almost at a critical stage now. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of Scotchies would resonate that with their community involvement and stuff like that. So moving into community, in 2016, you received 70% of the first preference votes and became a councillor for the 12 Apostles ward for the Corongamite Shire. And 3 years later, you were a finalist in the Susan McKinnon Emerging Political Leader Award. But sadly, now that you've quit politics, you're moving on to another path. But there's a lot in that. I suppose I was interested, and I wasn't surprised that you put your hand up to be
do something for your community and put your hand up to join the Shire down there as a councillor. I've seen some of your speeches in social media. Some of them are hilarious, and I just have to laugh. But you're passionate about it, and when you put your mind to something, I think you really have a decent crack. Tell us about your time on the Shire down there, and in particular, your real passion for around road safety and improvement of the roads down there. And there's some significant funding that's been channeled, and I'm pretty sure it's because of the work that you've done.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, I'm all for politics. I think, when you get an emerging leader award and then you quit, it sort of it doesn't make sense.
Not sure what that message said.
Well, the interesting thing is, and to be quite honest, yes, I'm not running this election, but I'm a firm believer in politics that I think we'd all be better off if people dropped in but didn't drop anchor. And I say that in all honesty because, and it's not saying that you can't go back, and I may well go back, but the fact is that I think that the days of the career politician need to be over. I really do believe that people need to have a much closer touch to the real world and go back into politics or go into politics, go at your hardest and then jump out. So I left the police force. I've got good investigation skills, and I ultimately use them. I don't feel that I have a choice. That's what I do. I mean, it's in the DNA. And I noticed or identified the fact that we were having, major problems with international tourists. And this was in the early days. And as I started investigating, I found 50 fatalities caused by international tourists in Australia. Wow. Yeah, like enormous. It's off the Richter scale. And at that time, and the in particular in WA, were selling these self-drive tours to Chinese people in particular. And the Chinese, they're practically non-drivers, most of them. And they were coming to Australia and they'd have the routes set up that with 2 and 3 and 4 hour stretches of driving. Well, guess what? They drive in front of a bus and we drive on the wrong side of the road and whatever. So that I put light on that issue, and there was a lot of funds put in. If you drive the Great Ocean Road, you'll see the signs "Drive on the left" in Australia and arrows on the which way to go and so on. So some of those simple things I've no doubt would have saved lives, so I think that I'm really proud of the contribution that I made. But having said that, the allowance for being a councillor was 20 grand, and to be quite honest, it's not sustainable. It's ridiculous, really, to think being a councillor these days is different to being a councillor before. Like, you're dealing in $60 million budgets, and some of the shires in Melbourne are enormous. Like, I mean, even our the assets here are worth $500 million, and you're paying someone 20 grand in an allowance. So it's you're the only people who can afford it are retirees, Scotty.
Yeah. You weren't, just deviating again, you weren't a fan of potholes either.
Well,
many a video of potholes.
I
reckon I saw dozens of pothole shots from down there. Hilarious.
I appeared numerous times in front of potholes, and apparently my social media was getting such a wide reach, and I was pushing the limit on code of conduct when I was describing their potholes.
Yes, you were.
That actually what happened was...
Very colourful descriptions.
Well, Adam Somurek, who I called Bad Santa, because he then responded and gave us a $5,000 pay cut at Christmas Eve.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, so during COVID, we've all watched Netflix and found ourselves watching a bit of The Box. And I must admit, I think it was a couple of weekends ago, and I was daydreaming watching the ABC or something, and it was the SBS actually. And there's your head, it appeared. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm watching a rerun of the Australian Story or something. But no, it wasn't. It was you're on a show, and I'd encourage everyone to watch it. You appeared on Every Family Has a Secret on SBS. And it was a couple of weeks ago. And you were brought in as a specialist homicide investigator. Do you want to just share that? I think it's a great, everyone wants to listen and Google it and have a watch that, but give us a bit of a rundown on that and how you got involved, I would have thought.
Well, SBS rang me and asked me if I would do some, assist them ultimately and see if I can tie a few ends together for Every Family Has a Secret, which is ultimately it's about someone, they're either picking someone or someone comes forward and they say, track down my family. And so Matthew Hamill, who's a French boy who goes looking, trying to track down his biological mother. He finds that she's missing, and then the research starts going. I get pulled into it, and then as it turns out, the last person that saw her was the last person that saw another two people, and as it turned out, one of them had been found murdered, and the other one is missing. So, a sad tale really for him, but ultimately he's finding his family history, come what may, good or bad. He's working out who he is. He was adopted as a young baby, and so that was good. And once you meet him, you've got to help him. He's one of those people, you sort of. They're so passionate, and you just, that's just me. I like helping people, and I was more than happy to help along there.
You certainly brought out your skills of detective work and investigating and digging down a burrow. That was certainly came through as well. So I've no doubt that you enjoyed doing that and helping out someone, and it certainly came through. And I encourage everyone to watch it. Just sort of getting towards the end here, Eli. It's going to bring me back to a bit of the footy days. And we had Robbo, who used to look after our valuables at each game. So back then we used to put our phones and wallets in a bag, and then he'd chuck it in his car or in his glove box or something. Can you just let the listeners know, is it true that you dropped in one of your specials into one of those bags? And you can explain that.
There is a story that I dropped a revolver into the valuables bag, yes, Scotty, and
it is true.
Yeah, there's an element of truth to that. I will say, and you remember, a lot of old Scotchies remember Gussie Taylor. I remember turning up at Tuesday night training. I was late, and I said, "Look, Gussie, you've got to get rid of Percy for me." I had my revolver with me, and I said, "Listen, can you sort something out with this while I'm at training? I can't leave it in here in the rooms." And he said, "Yeah, no, I've got the best idea, Illo." So that was fine. So I went to training. I came back in, and I had a holster that, you put down the front of your pants, sort of next to the crown jewels. And I said, "Gus, have you got my revolver, mate?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll go and get it for you." Well, anyway, I didn't ask him where he put it. So I grabbed the revolver off him, I put it straight down my strides, and I realised immediately where he'd hidden it, in the freezer. So I had a frozen revolver right where he don't want it. And that seemed to be his spot. But it was, I think some of the things that went on in the footy club probably better stay there, Scotty, if you don't mind.
No, fair enough. Won't bring any more out. That's the last of the tales from the footy club. Speaking of clubs, your daughter is quite a talented cricketer. Do you mind sharing a story about her? She's 15.
Yep.
And I've been following her story, and I think she's going to be one to watch. Could you tell us about Millie?
Well, I didn't push either of my kids to play any sport that I loved. I thought I'd let them make their own mind up. And I remember when they said they wanted to have a hit of cricket, and the first time, and she was little, 6. And I said, "Right, this is how you bowl." And then she let one go, and I thought, I reckon she's got a bit of talent here, it came in. So anyway, to cut a long story short, she's been in the Cricket Victoria squad since she was 12. They asked me to bring her down. I said, "She's way too young. It takes me 6 hours there and back you know, don't waste my time. And he said, well, I'll have a look at her. And the first ball she bowled was 96 kilometres an hour. And he turned to me and he said, you're going to be coming here for a long time, Simon.
Good on
anyway, she's now 15. I think she's bowling probably around 110 kilometres an hour. So to give you an idea, the last T20 women's game, the fastest bowler was about 106 to 108. The fastest bowler in the world is about 120 to 130. And so she looks like she's got a pretty bright future, but she works hard, and the most important thing is that she loves it. So
yeah, she's got a passion.
Total passion for her.
Yeah, that's good. She's one to watch. So, Elo, that's sort of pretty much wraps it up. But there's something that one of our registered old boys, I'm not going to let you know who he is, but you might be able to work it out. He said, Elo, true legend, but do you reckon you could repay me for the ciggies that you've borrowed?
That could be one of about 1,000 people.
Yeah,
Scotty.
well, I probably gathered that as well. So, Elo, thanks for joining me. Thanks for accepting my call a couple of months ago and allowing yourselves to open yourself up to the Scotch community for all the work that you've done in the past. You're a pretty courageous guy. I don't, every time I've mentioned your name or I have a chat about you or have a beer about you and stuff like that, you're always held in the highest regard. And I'm very proud to have you as my mate and one of the Scotchies. So thanks again for sharing your story.
Likewise,
listeners. Yeah, it's terrific to have you. So thanks everyone for listening in. On behalf of the Old Scotch Collections Association and Simon for joining us, and my colleagues here, Caroline Taylor, for helping me put this together. Without her, I wouldn't be able to, this wouldn't roll. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Keep safe out there, keep active, and look after yourselves. Bye for now.
Go Scotchies.